Hello everyone, to the chair of the panel, Doc Irene Lucas, to the members, Doc Joanna Marie Lim and Doc Eden Flores, and of course my thesis advisor, Doc Maan Garland, and to all the persons who will be able to watch this video presentation, good day. My name is Jameson M. Miranda. I am taking Master of Arts in English Language Education at the LSU. Today, I am so excited to propose my paper with the title, An Emerging Type of Receptive Bilingualism in the Bilingual Universe, a case of two Filipino children. So, before we proceed to the presentation, to the meat of the presentation, let's first have the overview. I'll be talking about here basically chapters 1 and 2, the problem and its background and methodology. For the problem and its background, I'll be presenting first a video synthesis, which will cover the RRL and the introduction, followed by the problem statement or the research questions. I will also be delineating the theoretical and conceptual frameworks, and finally the study significance, scope, and limitations. After discussing the problem and its background, I'll proceed right away with the methodology. All right? So to begin, in this paper, you may be wondering why I am mentioning there in the title the term bilingual universe. This is so because I am associating in this research bilingualism to a universe. So this is sort of an analogy or a metaphor. Using analogies and metaphor is an encouraged style in scientific thinking, particularly in writing qualitative studies. So all throughout this paper, I'll be mentioning bilingualism as likened to a universe for us to understand more deeply and in a more concrete way the phenomenon, okay? Especially the receptive bilingualism. So let's have now the video synthesis to present the introduction and RRL. Let's all watch the video I made, okay? In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There you have it.
Just like the expanding universe, research on bilingualism is ever evolving. With roughly 7,102 languages in the world, more than half of the global population speaks at least 2 languages, making bilingualism a global phenomenon. In addition, due to the unprecedented interracial and interlinguistic encounters, bilingualism has continued to evolve into its many classifications, making it a vigorous academic enterprise. In fact, overlapping terms related to bilingualism have surfaced, such as achieved bilingual, which is similar to late bilingual, balanced bilingual, which is the same as with ambilingual, consecutive bilingual, which is similar to successive bilingual, and many more. Among these terms, 2 bilingual varieties have received scant investigations. These are active bilingualism and receptive bilingualism. Active bilingualism is also called productive bilingualism. This refers to the meaningful use of 2 languages or the ability of an individual to produce meaningful and comprehensible speech constructions in 2 or more languages. On the other hand, receptive bilingualism, also known as passive bilingualism, refers to the linguistic capacity of a person to comprehend and probably read a particular language without having the ability to speak or write it. Birdsmore defines a receptive bilingual as someone who understands a second language in either its spoken or written form, or both, but does not necessarily speak or write it. However, some contend that it does not necessarily mean that receptive bilinguals cannot speak the other language at all. Shirkina Libir argues that this is true because of some linguistic constraints, such as the receptive bilingual's slow speech, a notion of committing possible grammatical miscues in the other language. Grosjean calls this factor as affective. So, how does one become a receptive bilingual? Individuals become receptive bilinguals usually when they naturally adopt the dominant language of their community, and thus their ability to produce their home language diminishes to the point that they become unable or unwilling to speak it, although they can understand it. For example, the children who enter formal education, their home language tends to weaken as the prevalent language of their environment becomes their dominant language, which is the usual case among many bilingual children. Certainly, there are other factors that may explain receptive bilingualism, but studies on these apparently are limited. The factors included in these investigations are the role of the home, school, language attitude, and media. These current studies have focused more on bilingualism in general, if not on the other types of bilingualism. Needless to say, the lack of studies in the Philippines of the different types of bilingualisms, especially receptive bilingualism, is evident. Studying bilingual varieties in the Philippine context is necessary, since our nation's linguistic diversity is incredible. Given these contentions, it is then important to explore receptive bilingualism, especially in the Philippines, and ask this question. Is it true always that children's home language weakens as they acquire and learn the majority language of their community? What if there are cases when bilingual children still will not or cannot use the majority language despite long exposure to it? Instead, still use their home language. Contrary to what the literature says, is this a new emerging type of receptive bilingualism? Come, let us explore the realm of receptive bilinguals in the dynamic and complex universe of bilingualism.
There you have it, the video synthesis which covers the introduction and RRL. But before we move on, I'd like first to have a recap of some important points or salient arguments discussed in the video. According to our present literature, receptive bilingualism happens when some bilingual children tend to lose their ability to speak their home language when they have acquired the majority language. But is it true always? Because in my research, at least in my case study, some bilingual children still will not use the majority language even if they comprehend it and use instead their home language. Having asked this question, it is then necessary to pose this problem statement. So we have two essential research queries. Number one, can the two cases in the study, in my study, be circumscribed as a distinct type of receptive bilingualism? Number two, if so, what possible factors may explain their being receptive bilinguals despite sufficient exposure to the majority language of their environment? So having asked or posed these research queries, we have to have a theoretical framework. So in my study, CAT underpins. This is the theory that underpins my study. CAT, or Communication Accommodation Theory by Howard Giles, had been originally utilized as a social-psychological model examining accent and bilingual shifts in communication. In bilingual contexts, especially in bilingual context, we have two essential elements when we talk about CAT. These are convergence and divergence. So what do we mean by convergence? Here, examples. For example, speaker A in convergence uses or accommodates the language of speaker B, according to Howard Giles, in order to earn an approval. On the other hand, when you say divergence, here speaker A diverges from or does not use the speaker B's language due to some social linguistic reasons. All right, so you have their convergence and divergence. Having this CAT, okay, which underpins the study, we now form our conceptual framework. On the left side, you have there the factors that might have explained receptive bilingualism as discussed in the present literature. So you have there the family, school, attitude, and media. Okay? So these factors are connected to the first and of course the majority language. All right? On the right side, you have their receptive bilingualisms with an S. With an S because we'd like to signify that we're trying to classify more types of receptive bilingualisms. Okay? In the middle, you have their convergence and divergence. So first, our home language is connected by a two-headed arrow. It's connected by a two-headed arrow to the majority language. All right? So that's the conceptual framework. Now, for the significance of the study, the investigation, this case study, is expected to offer more angled definitions and descriptions of receptive bilingualism. Because remember, my task here, my goal here is to define more clearly receptive bilingualism. All right? So if we have now a clearer definition of receptive bilingualism, okay, we can apply this knowledge on its practical realms. When we are designing curriculum, bilingual curriculum or curricula, we will now have a more precise understanding of what really receptive bilingualism is. So our strategies will be more accurate and more angled, so to speak. All right? And of course, this paper or this research will also aid bilingual and multilingual families with receptive bilingual children in understanding and to a greater degree appreciating their condition. So in my case study, some people try to discriminate, okay, receptive bilingual children because even though they're communicating with them, they will still keep on using English language, not the language of the majority, okay, or the majority language, so to speak. So through this research, we'll be able to aid bilingual and multilingual families with receptive bilingual children to understand their condition, okay, and of course their peers, okay, the peers of these bilingual children. And finally, it is hoped that this research spark the interest of Filipino researchers and even the scholars abroad to continuously untangle the many complexities in and of bilingualism. All right? So let's proceed to the scope and limitations. The study only captures the discursive interactions of receptive bilinguals in school, not at home, through the evocative field experiment. So I wasn't able to capture the actual conversations at home due to some privacy measures. All right? Therefore, the study only relies in the narratives relayed by the parents about how they engage in conversations at home and the very nature of their familiar linguistic interactions. So we were not able to actually capture their conversations at home, the participants' conversations at home, okay? And finally, all the observational data have already been gathered in a stretch of 10 months. Only 9 instances of observations were done, plus the other informal observations, okay? So that's the scope and limitations. Now let's proceed to the methodology. Here I will be discussing with you the research design, research setting, the participants, the selection criteria, procedure, and methods of analysis. First, let's talk about the research design. I will employ here case study method in order for me to closely evaluate the subject within a specific context, because that's the goal of case study according to Zinal in 2007. This is also exploratory in nature. This is not explanatory, but exploratory. Because its primary goal, the goal of my study, is to embark on an exploratory excursion to a perceived unexploited area of inquiry so as to render a thorough understanding of an emerging phenomenon. I am classifying this as an emerging phenomenon because this is, as far as I can see, a new type of receptive bilingualism that needs to be investigated. Okay, so this is not explanatory, although we will be exploring some factors that may explain receptive bilingualism, a new type of receptive bilingualism. So the research design is exploratory case study. For the research setting, the participants belong to a middle-class family in Quezon City. Both homes have internet connectivity and televisions. Okay? Both of their parents have college degrees, except for one who has vocational degree. All right? They belong to a small private school, both of them, the same small private school, with about 700 students and 60 teaching and non-teaching staff. The medium of instruction are English and Filipino. Okay? Although most teachers, except English teachers, admitted in the interviews that they used Filipino more in discussing the lessons, in interacting with the students, especially inside the classroom. Okay? For the participants, let's meet Kath and Daniel. So fictive names have been used here. Although I have here Kath, the picture of a famous artist, and Daniel, of course, a famous artist, ABS-CBN artist. In order for me to spice up my presentation, so you have there Kath and Daniel. Okay, so Kath and Daniel are both grade 6 students, graduating elementary students at the time of the study. Okay. Kath is 12 years old while Daniel is 13 years old. Both of them spoke English first, according to their mothers. Both of them have had tutors in Filipino subjects. Kath attended regular school all throughout her academic life, okay, school life. Okay. On the other hand, Daniel attended a special school once, all right, because he was diagnosed to have an ADHD. Okay. Although I observed Kath is somehow special, but I have to postpone my somewhat special based also on my observations and the narratives of the other teachers. But I have to postpone that claim because the mother did not disclose that to me. Okay, as opposed to Daniel's mom. Daniel's mom voluntarily admitted, or she disclosed willingly, that his son was diagnosed to have an ADHD. Okay, so Daniel, okay, at least in the study, belonged to a typically developing population. But that's not the focus of the study. The focus of the study is to understand their being receptive bilinguals, okay, and the factors that might have explained their being receptive bilinguals. All right. Okay, so we are disregarding now the ADHD as a factor that could have explained their being receptive bilingual. Okay, a new type, so to speak, of receptive bilingual. Okay, participants. For the selection criteria, I use here a type of purposive sampling called extreme or deviant case sampling. So what is this? According to Patton, extreme or deviant case sampling is an approach that deals with cases that are rich in information because they are unusual or special in some way. According to Newman, the goal of extreme or deviant case sampling is to look for a cluster of different or peculiar cases and to investigate how these fall outside the general pattern. I classify Kath and Daniel as deviant cases because instead of using the majority language, okay, of their environment, they will still use their home language, all right, especially in interacting with their peers, teachers, and even their parents. Okay, so they will, their peers or the parents will use Filipino, okay, but they will respond in English, as opposed to what we've known so far in the literature. Okay, receptive bilingualism happens, according to the present literature, happens when the children, bilingual children, acquired the societal language, the majority language of their environment, and their home language, okay, tends to have been weakened, okay, because they have now already acquired the majority language. So Kath and Daniel, okay, their situation is quite different. Instead of acquiring the majority language, they are actually deviating or diverging from the majority language and still use their first language or home language, which is English. So this is bizarre, at least to me. Okay, so I am trying to classify them as a new type of receptive bilingualism. All right. So for the procedure, of course, first I will secure necessary consent, okay, from the principal, from the parents, and from the participants themselves. All right. So after all the permission and consent have been secured, I will now familiarize myself with the participants. Although I am the teacher, okay, I am also the teacher I am the teacher of the school, okay, that they go to. I don't have enough interaction with them, okay, really before. So I have to talk to them in order for me to familiarize with them. Okay, so I had casual conversation with them, okay, before we proceed with the evocative field experiment. So what is evocative field experiment? As used in Herkenrath's methodology that looked into the receptive multilingualism of immigrant Turkish-German children, evocative field experiment requires the interviewer to use a language desired by the evocative design and expects the children to speak the same language. Okay, this is so, we use this evocative field experiment because we would like to test whether they can really understand Filipino language, okay, the majority language of their environment, okay, and see if they will use Filipino or English, okay. So we use this evocative field experiment to test that, okay. So we want to prove if Kat and Daniel understand Filipino language, but still will use English language, their first or home language. So evocative field experiments will be 3 sets. The first set was already done. So this is situated in a secluded room with a managed temperature. Okay, so I'll show them. I'll ask them questions and I instruct them to do something, to identify something. All right. In order for me to understand really, to know really if they understand Filipino instructions, okay? So that's evocative field experiment. Okay. So after that, I will of course interview the parents, the participants themselves, okay, their peers, and their teachers, okay? And finally, I will be observing the participants during recess, lunch, okay, during their school time, and write memos, okay, or my observations and feelings, all right, towards my research or the subject. Okay, for the methods of analysis, first I will analyze the transcribed participants' language acquired during the evocative field experiments. So I will get here the percentage. Okay, so how many percent are there Filipino words uttered, okay, in the evocative field experiment? How many percentage are the English words? Okay, in order for me to actually understand whether they will really use Filipino or English, okay, and if they will, okay, what's the percentage? Okay, so after that, I'll be doing thematic analysis of the data gathered from the participants' interview, their parents, peers, and teachers. Of course, I will use observational data also in order for me to have data triangulation. Okay, so you have there, the thematic analysis will be coming from the data gathered from the participants' interviews, their parents, peers, teachers, and observations. All right, so there you have it, okay, the methods of analysis. So that's my, this is my video presentation of my proposal defense. I'd like to end this with this quote, two quotes from Bilingual Education website, okay? Bilingual is better according to that site. First quote, no one should have to choose one language and culture over the other because having both is undeniably better than having just one. And our culture, our traditions, our language are the foundation upon which we build our identity. So there you have it. I am so excited to finally meet with my panelists and improve my research. Okay. That's all. Okay, once again, I'm Jameson M. Miranda. This is my presentation with the proposal defense of my study with the title An Emerging Type of Receptive Bilingualism in the Bilingual Universe, a Case of Two Filipino Children. Thank you very much for listening. I hope to finally meet with the panelists to finally improve my research. Thank you very much and always stay safe. Bye-bye.
Just like the expanding universe, research on bilingualism is ever evolving. With roughly 7,102 languages in the world, more than half of the global population speaks at least 2 languages, making bilingualism a global phenomenon. In addition, due to the unprecedented interracial and interlinguistic encounters, bilingualism has continued to evolve into its many classifications, making it a vigorous academic enterprise. In fact, overlapping terms related to bilingualism have surfaced, such as achieved bilingual, which is similar to late bilingual, balanced bilingual, which is the same as with ambilingual, consecutive bilingual, which is similar to successive bilingual, and many more. Among these terms, 2 bilingual varieties have received scant investigations. These are active bilingualism and receptive bilingualism. Active bilingualism is also called productive bilingualism. This refers to the meaningful use of 2 languages or the ability of an individual to produce meaningful and comprehensible speech constructions in 2 or more languages. On the other hand, receptive bilingualism, also known as passive bilingualism, refers to the linguistic capacity of a person to comprehend and probably read a particular language without having the ability to speak or write it. Birdsmore defines a receptive bilingual as someone who understands a second language in either its spoken or written form, or both, but does not necessarily speak or write it. However, some contend that it does not necessarily mean that receptive bilinguals cannot speak the other language at all. Shirkina Libir argues that this is true because of some linguistic constraints, such as the receptive bilingual's slow speech, a notion of committing possible grammatical miscues in the other language. Grosjean calls this factor as affective. So, how does one become a receptive bilingual? Individuals become receptive bilinguals usually when they naturally adopt the dominant language of their community, and thus their ability to produce their home language diminishes to the point that they become unable or unwilling to speak it, although they can understand it. For example, the children who enter formal education, their home language tends to weaken as the prevalent language of their environment becomes their dominant language, which is the usual case among many bilingual children. Certainly, there are other factors that may explain receptive bilingualism, but studies on these apparently are limited. The factors included in these investigations are the role of the home, school, language attitude, and media. These current studies have focused more on bilingualism in general, if not on the other types of bilingualism. Needless to say, the lack of studies in the Philippines of the different types of bilingualisms, especially receptive bilingualism, is evident. Studying bilingual varieties in the Philippine context is necessary, since our nation's linguistic diversity is incredible. Given these contentions, it is then important to explore receptive bilingualism, especially in the Philippines, and ask this question. Is it true always that children's home language weakens as they acquire and learn the majority language of their community? What if there are cases when bilingual children still will not or cannot use the majority language despite long exposure to it? Instead, still use their home language? Contrary to what the literature says, is this a new emerging type of receptive bilingualism? Come, let us explore the realm of receptive bilinguals in the dynamic and complex universe of bilingualism.